Hi there. Well, I just want, if anybody's watching, to know that we understand that America is based on the sweat and blood of black folks. That's proof it's the basis of prosperity.
America was pretty much built on the back of slaves through the growing of crops such as tobacco and cotton, to the building of the White House, the US Capitol, railroads. Mind you, that obviously they were not compensated.
African Americans built this nation. You built this nation. You know, you're just starting to get real credit for that. Okay, I don't know if you know that. You're just starting to get, you built the nation. We all built it, but you were such a massive part of it. Bigger than you were given credit for. Does that make sense? Right? But through generations of blood, sweat, and tears, and you deserve a government that defends your interests, protects your families, and cares for our own citizens first.
When you look at systemic racism, you're looking at trends that have affected the wealth gap between the races historically in the United States. This is not about a person being a racist or your grandma being a racist. It has to do with what the economy looked like for white persons and black persons.
There is a shift happening in the United States right now, and a majority of the white Americans are finally waking up and admitting the truth. And also, they're learning their history the hard way and the history of America, because America was built on black labor. America was built on black endurance. America was built on black creativity. And for centuries, the narrative of America was told through the filtered lenses. The textbooks glorified the founding fathers, but it never mentioned the enslaved black people who built their wealth. In schools, they celebrated the innovation, they celebrated the industry, while the school itself failed to explain the actual people who generated the labor, the actual people who generated the crops, and also the profits that built the early American economy. So, guys, welcome back to Afrojudy's channel. I really appreciate your massive love and support. Kindly give the video a thumbs up, and let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. So let's unpack this episode together.
When you look at systemic racism, you're looking at trends that have affected the wealth gap between the races historically in the United States. This is not about a person being a racist or your grandma being a racist. It has to do with what the economy looked like for white persons and black persons historically in this country. Back during the time of the Civil War, the white folks had 56 times more wealth on average than a black person. So it was 56 to 1. Just 10 years later, in 1870, after Reconstruction, that gap went from 56 to 1 to 23 to 1. Pretty dramatic improvement in 10 years. The reason for that market improvement is that while black people were now allowed to purchase land and assets, so black wealth was going up, simultaneously white wealth was coming down, because what was a huge part of their wealth? Slaves. Human beings that they were no longer allowed to own. By 1900, the gap had closed all the way to 11 to 1. The average white person had 11 times more wealth than the average black person. And then it stalled out. And the reason it stalled out is because black people were still being discriminated against. They didn't have the same access to credit, if any access to credit. Legislative attempts at narrowing the gap were shot down, trying to finish narrowing the gap were shot down, like the 40 acres and a mule thing that never got passed. They faced widespread discrimination in education. The schools were still segregated and they weren't getting the best funding and they weren't getting the best teachers. They were discriminated against in the workforce. Now from 1900, when it was 11 to 1, to 1960, over 60 years, the gap squeezed a little bit smaller to 8 to 1. So for every black family that had $10,000 in total assets, the average white family had $80,000 in total assets, okay? And how did we go from 11 to 1 to 8 to 1? Well, a couple things happened. FDR made it illegal to discriminate against black workers, but only for purposes of the military and government positions. But still, every little bit helps. And then also, you had World War I and World War II. So many white men left the American workforce that black men were finally able to start moving up into higher paid positions. That doesn't mean they were paid the same as the white person who had previously done that job, but they were being paid more than they were previously, and they were getting access to higher skilled work. So then by the 1980s, the gap had closed to 5 to 1. And what was helping close the gap? Civil rights that had taken place between 1965 and 1980. Fair Housing Act, federal minimum wage that did not discriminate. So those things were helping close that gap just a little bit. So that takes us up to 1980. But what has happened in the last 45 years? We were at 5-to-1 gap. How much have we closed since then? None. In the last 45 years, we've gone backwards. So we are now at a 6-to-1 gap. The average white family has 6 times more wealth than the average black family. And why is that happening? Well, because wealth compounds. It's not just about who has the ability to earn X salary. It's that the white families were starting with more wealth, more property, more stocks, bonds, etc. And they're able to compound that wealth. Whereas if the black and brown populations are starting without those assets, they don't have the ability to compound. They end up having to spend what they earn. Mm-hmm. They have to consume the majority of the income that they're earning just to sustain a living. This isn't about blaming an individual. It's not about vilifying people. What it is about is exploring and understanding the economics behind why we have that gap so that we can address those things with policy moving forward.
The most evolutionary thing that white people can do is literally just witness and process the feeling of insecurity that's activated and triggered by external stimuli, and creating a domino effect chain reaction of one's own self-degradation, humiliation, and actually calling that in at a cellular level where there is this depth of self-exile. And why it's evolutionary is that to reverse, the pattern of time, to confront it, is something that is the most important thing that we all do. I mean, everybody is born to inertia of some type of legacy. It's just so happens that in America, the legacy of whiteness is the sterilization and effectively the extraction, of anything else outside of this political concept of whiteness, which does not really have any root historically, aside from the ability to extract, manipulate, and to prey upon other people without any recourse or effectively social consequence, ability to have a consequence, because that whiteness is so invisible, right? And why it's important is because white people, this is something where it began within the household. It began within the biology of most likely a white man, right? And why it's so important for us to acknowledge these things is that as we start to unravel the coil of just all the pain and all the tension, all the story that we believe that we've been told and all believe that all we are, we're able to actually begin to dissect that continuum of action that we're constantly recreating in our own lives by our inability to confront it and say no, right? We all have this power. This is the power of, perhaps in Christianity they call it free will, the individual, so on and so forth. But it's like the moment that we begin to take evolution into our own hands, we can see that this is what our ancestors have always actually wanted. The ones that have actually, we have to balance, this sort of like idea, principle side of ourselves and the animal side that's just constantly seeking survival. None of it is bad. None of it is a sort of malignant, malevolent thing. All of it is about the preservation and the survival of the organism, the individual you, right? So all of this to say, it's like once we can begin to re-examine and really get to know ourselves in a way where it's not informed by these lenses of dogma, of shame, of suppression, humiliation, needing forced labor bodies, land, so on and so forth, needing your mind, making it so you don't kill yourself because they need you to labor the lands. Once we begin to unfold this and humanize it, we're able to just arrive, in the ancestors' wildest dreams that white people can be included on too, but you gotta do the background work.
America was pretty much built on the back of slaves, through the growing of crops such as tobacco and cotton, to the building of the White House, the US Capitol, railroads. Mind you, that obviously they were not compensated. I mean, when you're forced to work to generate profit for other people that own you, that's capitalism. The plantation system was literally capitalism, just an earlier form of it in this country. So what other things did slaves build? They built state universities, canals, roads, agricultural estates, things such as the Trinity Church in New York, Fort Jefferson, a military installation, the University of North Carolina, Monticello in Virginia. Then there's a ton of landmarks that were built because slave owners made their profits off of slaves. For example, Faneuil Hall in Boston, Harvard Law School in Massachusetts, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Then you have so many Black inventors that lost the credit for their invention because a white person took credit. But I can make another video getting into that. But after everything that Black people and people of color did for this country, whether it was forced or not, we still sit here to this day and oppress them. And that is just mind-boggling.
I just want, if anybody's watching, to know that we understand that America is based on the sweat and blood of Black folks. That's it's the basis of the prosperity, but also the standard of living that we've got in the UK is because of slavery. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We have to recognise that fact. And I don't know what else I can say, really, but I just really utterly appalled at the way that Trump is trying to basically send America back to the days of Jim Crow. So, for example, in the last week, Trump has legislated so the government federal agencies are no longer stopped from segregating facilities. Absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. Now, and I want to make the point about the UK, which is I'm from London. It's the second most multicultural city in the world after Toronto. And I'm a white person, but I have a mixed race child. And I would say that London is a place that's very welcoming to everybody. But the standard of living we've got, as I said earlier on, is historically based on the profits of slavery. And we just have to recognize this as it is. And if you don't understand your history, if you don't understand other people's culture, I don't know why you're living. That's all I've got to say.
So I made a video a while back about white entitlement, and it was specifically related to a certain drama situation that happened on TikTok at the time. But I feel like this topic of white entitlement extends even more to like more recent situations and more recent events, so I wanted to bring it up again. White people feel very entitled to the bodies, the minds, the opinions, the sympathy, the art, the culture, the food of people of color, and specifically in this context that I'm talking about, Black people. They feel very entitled to these things because the system of white supremacy and racism has indoctrinated them into believing that they are inherently entitled to everything about this either a person of color or a Black person. I'm talking about Black people specifically. If y'all want, I can address like different races of people in other videos. But Black people specifically, they feel that they are entitled to everything about the Black being. Their mind, their bodies, the children that they birth. Guys, did you know in slavery, all of y'all know this, we learned about it in school, a slave would have a child and she can't even have her own child. The child was sold. The child was sold. They were entitled and they had autonomy over every single part of the Black person's life, of the African person's life, of the slave's life, right? And this mindset of entitlement isn't even just about Black people. It's about conquering lands, other people's lands that they haven't even been to yet, they feel entitled to. They cut up Africa into pieces and they share it with their European brothers and sisters. Like this. Like you can have Angola, you can have Ghana, you can have Sudan, you can have They share it up and they split it up like this because they feel entitled to the resources. They feel entitled to the people of that land to the point that they don't see them as people, they see them as resources. They see them as items. They see them as commodities. They see them as products. They see them as things to be used and abused for profit, to pleasure themselves, and not even just profit, to pleasure themselves in different ways. They feel entitled to Black bodies. They feel entitled to Black bodies for sex. They feel entitled to black bodies to be pleased by black bodies, whether it's through dance, whether it's through music, whether it's through art, whether it's through sex, through sexual pleasure, through rape, through sexual assault. They feel entitled to black bodies, to black people in many, many different ways. Now, let's look at this. You see, a black person gets brutally killed by a police officer or brutally killed in any situation. Media cries over it for one day. We move on immediately. Honestly, nobody cries over it. Maybe a little few condolences, but we're gaslighted. We're gaslighted into believing that it was the black person's fault for being brutally killed. We were gaslighted into believing that, oh, they were doing this, they were doing that, they lived their life doing this, so it was their fault that they were doing this, right? No white people will give any high level of sympathy or empathy. No white person is going to be crying on camera for any black person that was killed brutally by a police officer, famous black person or otherwise, right? No white person is going to be crying on camera or losing their minds on camera for that, right? No sympathy for them whatsoever. And black people are just kind of like, they're just sad because it's just like, well, we lost another one of our brothers and sisters, right? But nobody cares, and everybody moves on immediately. It's gone. Nobody cares about black lives as much as they should. Y'all all put those black squares in y'all's profile pictures back in 2020. None of y'all actually care about black lives. You need to deconstruct. That's one other topic. Anyway, a white person dies. A white person dies. And oh my gosh, the world stops. The world stops. Everything is facing that direction. You see white people coming on camera who never agree with this person, who never sat with this person, who never even would have even associated themselves with this person in that way in their entire life. They're sitting in front of the camera crying, writing songs, writing letters, no matter what side of the political spectrum they stand on. And then when people of color, black people, specifically come out and say that they don't feel sorry for this person, they don't feel sympathy for this person, they don't feel any remorse because this person spent their life being racist, being hateful, and just spreading each and every kind of hate they could against black people, right? They don't feel any strong feelings about it, right? Because of this. They're just kind of apathetic towards it. They were absolutely berated. And the white people call them hateful. You're hateful. You're spreading hate. How could you want someone to die? Nobody deserves to die. Nobody deserves to die. Nobody deserves to lose their life. He had a family. He was a person. Nobody deserves to lose their life. And they absolutely berate and mock and demonize and gaslight people of color for their viewpoints on this person who spread hate and who would not care if a black person lived or died. They absolutely berate them for this. And you're like, why? Why? Why do they feel so entitled to have to have our sympathy, to have our empathy? White people feel entitled to every part of us, guys. This is going to be controversial, and y'all, some people are not going to like this. And I said that I wouldn't address this situation again, but this thought came to my mind, and I'm sorry, y'all, when I think of something I have to. This will probably be the last I address it, but who knows? I might think of something else to the situation, because there's just so much that it's like a reflection of society on this. Like, so much has come to light because of this. Because white people feel entitled to black people's sympathy and empathy as well. Because in the system, in the construct of slavery, black people had to be sympathetic and empathetic to white people. They had to take care of the white children. They had to aid the white woman in birth. They had to be there and be part of the house and be part of their lives and do everything they said. They had, no matter what, they had no choice. That was their life. And white people feel entitled to that same behavior. They feel that black people should be the most sympathetic to them. They feel like black people should be empathetic to them. They feel like black people should cater to all their needs, make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe, make them feel like they're trustworthy, and make them feel like loved, I guess. Because in white supremacy, black people are supposed to be a tool that is to lift up the white person. And that's why, part of the reason why, there are other reasons, but part of the reason why so many white people are just crying their eyes out online, sad about this situation, but then getting mad at you and calling out you for criticizing someone who deserves criticism for what they said and what they did. And they're saying, and they're gaslighting you and trying to make you seem out to be the bad guy, is because they feel like you have to be sympathetic. You have to be empathetic. There's no choice but for you to be sympathetic and empathetic because that's your job as a Negro, etc. Yeah.
Well, guys, the enslaved black people in the United States, they built the agricultural economy, especially the cotton, the tobacco, the rice, and it actually made America to be so wealthy. The black innovators, they contributed massively to the American economy, but they didn't receive credit. They didn't receive compensation despite everything that they did to make sure that the American economy is thriving so well. The black soldiers in the United States, they fought for every major city. They fought for America. They fought for the freedom of Americans, but they never received the freedom that they fought for. The black culture shaped America. The music, the slang, the language, the entertainment, the food, like everything, name them, but still they don't receive credit or of what they deserve. And I've come to realize that majority of the white people in the United States are now learning the American history the hard way, because some of these things they were never taught, and they have to accept the truth, because sometimes I know the truth always hurt, and they have to accept it after learning that history the hard way, because some parts of the black history are kind of being erased because they don't want the children of America to know how the black people suffered, to know how the black people built the economy of the United States and fought for it. Then again, the systemic racism came in, like for instance the housing discrimination. They literally discriminated black people in this sector, because that is how they considered black people to be so poor. They considered black people that they should not be living in certain places, because for decades the government and also the banks, they refused the mortgages to black families in redlining neighborhoods. And this is also part of systemic racism. Do you think this thing ended in the United States? It's still happening up to date. They are practicing it. They don't want to see black people thriving so well. They don't want to see black people succeeding in certain field, and this scares them, especially when they see the black people excelling, and the black excellence alone can shut these people down. Again, the criminal justice system, it has reached a point that you'll find that a black person is being stopped, a black person is being searched, receiving harsh treatment, and even getting jailed, because the system has always portrayed them as a threat, as danger, as criminal, and that's why it is doing all these negative things to them. And again, the war on drugs, it actually devastated the black communities disproportionately. When it comes to education system, if it is a wealthy white neighborhood, the schools will be well funded. But if it's a black neighborhood, you will find that there are a few resources, there are underpaid teachers. Some of the schools are getting defunded because they don't want to see the black people succeeding. They are scared and triggered by the black excellence. Then again, the employment and the wage gap, the studies actually shows that the resumes with the white sounding names, they actually get more callbacks than the identical resumes with the black sounding names. And again, the black workers are likely to be less paid than the white workers, even if you are well educated. Then the health disparities, like I told you in the last episode, that the medical neglect is getting out of hand in the United States, especially for the black mothers in labor. They are being neglected and they are likely to lose their lives more than the white women who are in labor. And again, the studies shows that the mortality rate of the pregnant black women is rising in the United States each and every single day. And in this part, white people, actually, you need to do better. If you are a nurse, if you are in a medical field, make sure you obey your oath. Make sure you treat everyone equally, regardless of their race. Because if you continue neglecting them, why don't you just resign and maybe focus on another career? Because your career, maybe it was not meant for you, and that's why you are doing the same thing, or you are still stuck to the history that the black people should not be treated the same way the white people should be treated. We are in the 21st century and this kind of things should not be happening. This systemic racism, I don't know when it will end, because some of the white people always still feel that is it's good to call the black people names, it's good to call them the R word, the N words, and they feel better. It's good to call them all the kind of animals in this world, because that is how some of them always consider black people to be. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this in the comment section. The awakening is getting rude each and every single day. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I honestly appreciate your massive love and support, and this video is for educational purposes only. So until next time, let's meet on my next episode. Peace and love.